now. And then we'll get started. So welcome to another of our RedBar events, Zoom webinars with our special guest, Ian Schon. Myself, Adam and David need really no introduction, but I will hand it over to Adam Moore because he knows Ian very well and is responsible for my absurdly growing pen collection that's coming from Ian. So I'll hand it over to Adam to introduce Ian, and then we will go through and get a tour of the workshop and see what's going on. All right, Adam.
Hey, everybody. Adam Moore here. I'm the RedBar official photographer, as many of you already know. But I want to introduce today a friend of mine. His name is Ian Schon. He is essentially our local mad scientist. He is a journeyman of all sorts. He's a maker, a creator, an agitator. He's an awesome dude. He is the creator of Schon Design and Schon Watches, S-C-H-O-N. That's his last name. Ian Schon, I'd like to introduce you to the RedBar crew. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Adam, Kathleen, Adam, the RedBars. It's great to be here today, together on the Zoom. So I thought I'd open it up today by giving you a little tour of the workshop and introducing some of the products I make. And then kind of like diving deep into a couple of the things I make and how I make them. And we're gonna start with some watches because like y'all are some watch nerds. So I started making watches in my apartment back in 2000 and let's see, I think it was 2015. And I have here 4 of the original apartment watches that I made. I call my aesthetic kind of like a minimal, like manufacturing chic. It's very heavy on the connection between the manufacturing and the finishing, and like how do we make textures that are like technical and celebrate the making of the objects. So on these 4 early watches, which are 4 watches I made in my apartment, back around like 2015, the first 4 I completed, you can see a lot of like machined textures on the outside of that bezel with the dots. And it was all about like trying to find ways that like the machine leaves a mark that is beautiful and not necessarily like redecorating the watches after manufacturing them. So I got really into that idea and got really into, I don't know, like the idea of like intentional textures, and it led me towards like this crazy multi-year journey to manufacture my first watch that I sold commercially, I guess, which is the Dot Cardinal. I'm a background on me, I'm a product designer, I'm an engineer. Like I worked in industry for a bunch of years, and this was like a side project where I'd go home and I'd machine my cases from scratch, and I'd make some hands, make some dials, and just like anyone, I was collecting watches, and I decided that the only way I could show my true passion for this was to apply my engineering knowledge to it and make the thing. So I got really into this journey of manufacturing watches, and it led to, put my camera on, it led to me purchasing some equipment and eventually quitting my job to make watches full time. And in my apartment, right now we're in a bigger space, which I'll show you in a moment. But in my apartment, I had 2 machines. When my roommate moved out, I didn't get another one. I kind of kicked him out. It's complicated. But I had this lathe here, this machine, hardened from 1940. And I had this 3-axis CNC mill that I purchased to make watch parts on. Right now it's actually running a pen, which we'll talk about later. But I had these 2 machines. And between these 2 machines, I wanted to make watch cases. So you're like, man, doesn't it take a lot of equipment and like big stuff to like make a watch case? And like, yeah, it totally does. And I didn't have that equipment. So I guess I wouldn't call it invented, but I'm going to use the word invented because I don't have a better word. I MacGyvered. That's a very accurate way to describe it. I MacGyvered a workflow. So the idea was, first I would always 3D print my holders, because it takes a long time to make a fixture or a jig, meaning something that holds something else during manufacturing. But I made these holders where I was like, okay, the first step, I'm going to machine the watch case out of a solid sheet, and boom, I'm going to make the blank, let's call it, do all the rough cutting. Eventually I started getting these water jet for me to save time because my tools were very small and I wanted to save machining time. So I get these blanks cut for me out of a big sheet. And I'd plop them in here and I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to hold it here. And then when I'm done, I'm going to move over here. And then I'm going to move over here. And I came up with this MacGyvered workflow, which essentially became like this fixture plate here for that mill that I just showed you. And it allowed me to make the geometry of the watch case that I wanted to make. And at this time, it was like, as a product designer, a lot of my peers would, let's see, there you go. A lot of my peers, they would design products and they put them in their Behance portfolio. So as a designer, you want to be prolific. You design a lot of cool things. You make a rendering of it. You document it, you put it on your portfolio, and you go back to your day job. But for me, I didn't want to just design a watch. I really needed to make this thing. So the harmony was between the workflow and if I don't want to do lug holes that are drilled through the case, I have to make a way to somehow hold the part and get blind lug holes. And I was like, how am I going to do that? So this fixture set was all about realizing the geometry and making that a reality. So the first step here in the mill would machine all the backside of the case up until this portion. O-ring grooves, screws, the seat for the movement, the area behind the lugs. And notice the outside of the case is still rough at this point. It's still very much unfinished. And then from here, I'd put it on that lathe that I showed you and I'd cut this curve by hand. And then I'd put this guy in where this silver puck is and I do the top machining. So boom, get the dots in there. Start cutting the outside geometry of the case and cleaning up the surfaces on the sides. And then the final step was this angle fixture, which is all about the blind lug holes. So I had to come up with a way to hold the watch case and angle it so that I could get in there with a really tiny drill bit and peck out those holes, rotate it by hand to the next position, peck out those holes, and move on. So I came up with this workflow, made a bunch of watches, and two of the watches that I showed at the beginning of this Zoom are two of those pieces. And I remember I took those two watches and I was so proud of them. And they were so cool because I made the case, I made the dial, I made the hands. I was like, wow, this is a big achievement. And I remember showing it to some watch collectors, and those watches were made out of aluminum because I was making them in my apartment on a small mill. And they're like, yeah, when can I get it in steel? And I was like, oh, that's hard. That's harder than aluminum. Shoot, how am I going to do that? So I started retooling for stainless steel, made a couple stainless steel cases in my apartment and a titanium case. Almost set my apartment on fire with the titanium case because I didn't have coolant and it sparked. And I was like, I need some help. So I called up a local shop. We sat down, we looked at the tooling package, and using the workflow that I created, we did a run of 100 cases on a better machine with coolant, like professional grade, DMG Mori with twin spindle for any of you nerds out there. And we manufactured the run of cases because as cool as it was to make watches in an apartment, it was by no means a good idea. So that was the start of my journey into watch manufacturing. And after I made these initial watches, I start looking at the tool marks that I talked about in the beginning that lend to this harmony between the design and the engineering and the finishing. And I was like, these are not nice enough for this market. They look a little bit too raw. So I started devising different methods to finish and create textures. So I built a couple different tools one of which I'll show you here on my shelf. This was like a custom belt sanding fixture that I built with a motor, and it would enable me to create a surface texture on the side of the watch that, this one's been cut a few times, but has like perfectly vertical lines and is like this beautiful satin and is like absolutely dialed, great geometry. So I would like devise a plan, make a hypothesis, build a fixture, get a texture, and then from there, move on to the next surface, and so on and so forth. So I built up this collection of tools, about like maybe 9, 10 different tools to create different textures on the case, and then different textures on the dials, and then so on and so forth for hands. And like, as you can see, like some of these textures are not so desirable straight off the machine. You know, they're like, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. Anyways, take my word for it. It looks like hot doggy doo-doo. But that's a technical term, by the way. It's something I borrowed from the Swiss. I don't know. But yeah, I came up with all these methodologies for finishing and manufacturing, and I went deeper and deeper, sold a bunch of watches, quit my job, was off on my own, started meeting people at RedBar all across the US as I was traveling around for trade shows. And it was a good time. Let's see here. We got a couple watches in this case that I'll show you. And yeah, it's been a little bit of a crazy ride the past bunch of months because I moved to, well, besides the obvious reasons, but I moved to Philadelphia in April of last year. So I've relocated to the studio from Boston, and I've just been resetting up all my tools and getting production back going. This piece that I wanted to show you here in the light, and I'm going to set up my tripod so I can show it for you a little bit better, is another thing I'm really passionate about. And this is one of my crystallized titanium watches. And you're like, crystallized titanium, what's that? I got really into the idea of like hunting for my own material, something unique to my pieces that other watch brands or companies didn't have, access to. And I chanced upon this through the aerospace industry. And I came up with a workflow to manufacture titanium that shows the grain structure, like those little grains, those speckles on the surface. And it's beautiful in person. It's getting a little bit lost in the video, but I got really into this material to showcase the connection between, again, science and art. This is highly technical finish. You're only able to create this finish by going on your own. You can't source this material, which was kind of fun to like have something that's like, well, why buy from an independent? Well, because they have these things, these unique touch points, and this is one of those things that I'm really proud of. And the orange dial here is created with the crystallized titanium as well, but the orange color comes from an oxidation process that is called anodizing. And anodizing is something that I'm really into. It is a process to create an oxide layer on the titanium that changes the color. So you're like, oxide changing the color, like steel, right? When steel rusts, it becomes red. That's an oxide. When aluminum oxidizes, it becomes like chalky white. When titanium oxidizes in nature, nothing really happens. It gets like a drab color. It doesn't oxidize too much naturally. But if you artificially oxidize titanium, you can create a color. And we're going to do a little bit of that today together here on the Zoom. We are going to anodize some titanium. And I'm going to walk y'all through the principles of anodization and what that actually means. But before we do that, go ahead.
Actually, there's a couple of questions, but one I wanted to point out is that the texture, that material, that crystallized titanium, looks like it's textured. It looks like it's a hammered finish, but it's actually not. It's smooth. So I just wanted to point that out to the folks on the Zoom, that you expect to touch that case and have it feel like a hammered finish, and it's smooth. So it's a little bit more mind blowing when you actually touch it. We have a question about the watches. What movements do you use in your watches?
Great question. I use bowel movements. No, just kidding. I use Doxa. Bad joke. Watch the crowd. Please forgive me.
Definitely a joke of Adam Craniotis, so that's fine.
I'm like 13 still. I use Doxa, new old stock movements. And initially I was just using Pizu 7000 series movements, which are akin to the 7000 series ETAs. And I had limited run of those. All the aluminum watches had a Peugeot movement in them. And when I decided to redesign for the running indicator, which I haven't talked about, but I'll show it to you while I talk about it, I decided to look for another movement with a sub-second. And what I found was a new old stock bunch of like, I wouldn't say they were Eboshes. They were like semi-finished movements marked Doxa. Here, zoom in. Oh God. Can't quite zoom in here, but if you see here at 6 o'clock, there's a line that's about to eclipse into a dot, and this is like a running seconds disc. And when I found these Doxa 100 caliber, which are essentially an ETA 900 series, which is like an early ETA, they had a sub-second. But with the sub-second, I wasn't super pumped because it was like, it positioned the seconds really high up on the dial. And it's like wearing a really short tie, you know, it's not aesthetic. And the watch movement kind of dictates where the seconds position is going to be on the watch. And I didn't like that as a designer, so I created a disc. And the disc allowed me to lower the seconds lower onto the watch exactly to where I wanted them to be aesthetically. So those discs, I got one right here on the table that's bad disc. You see it's got those dots and those lines here on the disc. And that's what's rotating at the sub-seconds position. Lost it. It's gone forever. Yeah,
it was bad. It's okay.
It was bad. Bad sub-second disc. So yeah, it's got what I call a running indicator, which is kind of like surprisingly tricky to manufacture because you have to get the heights just right. You know, if you imagine there's only so much space behind the dial to the movement, and then you know, you have to have just enough end shake on that, but you can't let it rub the movement, you can't let it rub the dial. So your tolerancing and the concentricity between your center hole and that running indicator has to be like dead on. And to get that done in like such a thin profile was very difficult. So I ate like tremendous shit trying to figure that out. And I like suffered like a dog. I suffered.
Ian, what's your case size there? So everyone knows.
Great question. The case size is a 37 millimeters from this point to this point. But since there's crown guards, it kind of wears a bit bigger, and it's got longer lugs. So it has like a little bit more presence on the wrist than what you traditionally expect from a 37 millimeter diameter.
It definitely wears bigger. I agree.
And yeah, I like the long, you know what's funny, Adam, when we were at a RedBar in New York once, and I saw you had a Railmaster, Omega Railmaster, had those beautiful long lugs, the vintage one. And it like made me very excited in my heart. And that was right around the time when I like redesigned this watch case to extend these lugs out and cut the corner, get rid of that radius there, which was like unsightly. So chopping that out of there and then extending the lugs kind of like that Railmaster was like, bueno, magnificenza. I don't speak other languages. We got this case here. This is kind of weird. I pulled it off my desk because it's something that I don't show around a lot. This was a failed experiment that is going to become a personal watch, but it is that crystallized titanium material, but it's gold with nitrogen infused into it. So it's got this weird like camo kind of look. Enhance. But it's got like this weird like sunbursty, like setting sun kind of vibe going on. And then there was some oxygen that creeped into the furnace when we were nitriding it, and it like purplized the corner of the case, which is like totally wacko. So I'm kind of into like these like totally wacko weird watches. Big fan of like the PVD blued cases that we're seeing from some watch manufacturers right now. Big fan of, you know, just like wacky stuff. This is another personal watch that I have never gotten around to finishing, but you know, make it blue, because why not? Natural anodized titanium, which brings me, actually, I'll show you one more piece of anodized titanium, and then we'll go make that happen. So we're gonna make this. So this is all natural finished, no paints. Come on, focus, little guy. There you go. And the colors you're seeing are oxides in the titanium. And I'm gonna break that down a little bit. I'm gonna show you how we do that today. And then after we anodize the titanium, we're gonna talk a little bit about pens and stuff, because I also happen to make pens and a bunch of stuff. So yeah, so let's
Ian,
go over. Yeah, oh yeah.
Before we jump off of the watches, you can go over wherever you're headed now, but there's a few more quick questions. One is, are you doing this all of yourself, or do you have a team of people that you work with?
I do this solo. Yeah, I mean, I have like moments where I bring in vendors, right? Like anyone would. Like for instance, actually, he's not a vendor. My watchmaker's a really good guy. I do not do my own movement service. It's just too much work for me to like spread myself that thin. So I work with Nicholas Trahadius out of Precision Watch Works in Boston. He's a great dude. He does great work. He was CW21 Rolex certified for a while until they took that away from everyone. But yeah, good dude. So I work with Nick. He services the movements. For my dials with numerals, I have a house that etches the numbers into the blank, and then I machine out the rest of the features and finish it. So I work with an etching company. Finishing, assembly, all the polishing, that's in-house. All the manufacturing was done in partnership with my friend's machine shop for the cases, and I was there running that machine the entire time, but I could never afford that machine. It was too expensive, too big. But yeah, so I made the cases in one run.
Speaking of price, someone asked what your average price is on your watches here.
That's a great question. They're running right now in between 6,000 to 7,000, depending on your customizations and your features. And the lead time is about 8 months. I'm running a bit behind. I had, when I moved here to Philly, I like didn't make watches for like 6 months because I was setting up my pen manufacturing again and like getting the machines running. And that kind of lagged me out. And right now I distribute to Japan. So I have a couple boutiques that sell the watches in Japan, and I'm fulfilling those orders that have been placed earlier in the year. And after that's finished, I'll be producing custom work. In between now and like probably my next couple of like commissions for the domestic market, like anyone who contacts me directly to buy a watch, I think I'm gonna make a couple pieces like from my heart, like just make what I want to make and see where that goes. Maybe finish some of the weirder watches on my bench just to like get myself back into the zone of like producing things that are like really out there and try and inspire people when they work with me to create a watch to do something that's a little bit more outlandish. Not so outlandish that I'm like, you know, working myself to the bone and like bleeding out, but like outlandish enough that it's like, dang, that's cool. That's why you work with an independent creator or an artist in general. So I'm working on a couple pieces that will be for sale at some point. And there'll be some wacky weird stuff. Like
one last watch question. Sorry.
Yeah, please.
Seth asked, is it possible for you to make a custom watch based on your basic design, but with input from a customer, not just based on dial color, case metal, etc., but also based on watch features within reason? I'm assuming that Seth is asking about different movements potentially.
So that's a great question. I wrestled with this a lot. Would I like to do that? Yeah, absolutely. Could I do it in this shop? Sure. You know, I got the lathe, I got the mill, got the finishing techniques, I've got CAD, I've got cutters. The problem is that it gets really, really, really expensive really quick. And, you know, I've got a 2,800 square foot space and I got to pay rent here. So, you know, if I spend a month on a watch, we got to factor in a month of rent into the cost of the watch, you know, and it's like, it's a little brutal. So I've been shying away from truly custom work outside of the scope of the manufactured parts that I have currently, mostly because the price is just, you know, it's not, I personally don't feel comfortable selling watches at that price point right now. So I'm sticking to the dot, which is like the current model and geometry of case, with the option of the dial with the numerals, which is called the cardinal. And I'll show you those before, at the end of the day, we'll rehash those. And the prismatic, which is a titanium dial. And the options are more around finishing. I had a customer who brought me an Audemars Piguet movement and said, make this into a watch. And I was like, hell yeah, like that's a sick idea. And then I like had to pump the brakes like super hard, because I was like, I can't feed my family doing this. There's no way. So as much as I am like a crazy creator, yeah, I have to pump the brakes. So this year, the year 2020 is the year of no. I'm practicing in the secret art of no, but I appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out with wild, outlandish, crazy ideas. We can always have a dialogue, and I can say no, but we can entertain them, or I can maybe connect you to another independent who can help you achieve that goal. So always feel free to reach out.
Now on to the pens.
Onto the pens. Oh, go ahead.
No, you were good. I'm interested in seeing the anodizing process. So that's.
Yes. So that's where we're seated right now. We're going to talk a little bit about the dials, and we're going to talk about how to get those colors. We're going to do a sample part. We're gonna anodize a tube. We're gonna get some of these colors on this raw titanium tube. So you see like all these crazy hues here. This is kind of like the spectrum of colors you can achieve with anodizing. And I'll show you how we do that. So I'm gonna flip the camera around for a bit, and I'm gonna kind of walk through anodizing a piece of work. We've got a SMT micro anodizer, which is essentially a power supply that's current limited, with a pad print on it that says micro anodizer. You can use any power supply. You can actually even anodize with like batteries and stuff. Like if you're creative, you can do this with a lot of stuff. This process, mind you, there's a couple of different types of anodizing. There's anodizing that you hear about for aluminum. That's a completely different process. I utilize that in my finishing work a lot. I have partners from that. But yeah, titanium is one of the only materials, and niobium, the reactive metals, that can produce this type of finish. So what I have here is a paintbrush that's hooked up to an electric lead that's hooked up to the power supply, and I've got an alligator clip to the part. So we're going to complete the electrical connection, and essentially almost as if we're welding this part. Like this is a similar process to welding, but we're going to be running at 17 volts right now to start off. And when I touch the paintbrush to this workpiece, what you're going to see is like there's a little bit of a liquid on there. That's what's called electrolyte. It helps the electricity pass efficiently through the part. If I kind of hold my paintbrush on this, you see what's happening. We see like a little yellow brown start to show up over here. I'm gonna like stick around here for a second. Happy little browns. I'm gonna Bob Ross this shit. I'm gonna wipe that liquid off so you can just see the contrast right now. So we have like a brown color on top of the silver. It's a golden brown. It's very metallic. It doesn't show up so much in the video, but trust me, take my word for it, it's a golden brown. I'm gonna start changing the voltage, and what that's gonna do is it's gonna enable me to create a thicker oxide layer. And the reason I want a thicker oxide layer is to be able to create essentially a thicker prism. And what that prism is doing is when light hits the surface of the prism or the oxide, right? Some of the light is going to bounce off the surface of the oxide, and some of it is going to travel through to the base material. And you get two waves of light coming out of a surface, which produces a color. That's kind of how color works in general. I probably Mickey Mouse that pretty hard. So if there's a scientist on here that does like photonics, like I'm super sorry. And feel free to send me an angry email. But this is like the lowest voltage color you can do. And this is kind of the color of that crystallized titanium dial that you saw over there. Now I'm going to start cranking up the voltage, and we're going to get into the blues and purples, which I really like. And if you've ever seen a flamed piece of stainless steel, this is the similar color spectrum you're going to see from that flamed piece of stainless. Delicious. Let's kind of get that worked in there. And I started getting into this process really deeply because I was manufacturing pens out of titanium and I wanted to customize them. And, you know, it was just like something that naturally was like, oh yeah, of course I want to learn about this cool technology. So I like threw down some coin and got this set up so that I could create these hues and colors that enable me to have like a customizable experience for those pens. And this
Ian,
is
sorry to interrupt you.
No,
is there a actual metallurgic benefit to doing this process? Do you heat treat in this case?
Great question. I can't speak to it super deeply. There is a little wear resistance that's imparted to the surface, but titanium oxide is very soft in comparison to aluminum oxide. There is a little bit of a protective surface created, but not by much. But that's a great question. It's not hardening the material, it's not compressing it, but it is getting deep into that surface. And it is like you have to like cut it off afterwards. So I'm at about 50 volts right now, and I'm going to start to crank it. And what you're starting to see is like browns into blues, cool blues. But what's interesting about this is because the workpiece is wet, because we're still covered in this electrolyte here, you're not seeing the true color. Because remember, we have the material, we have the oxide on top of it, and then on top of the oxide, we have the electrolyte. So what really needs to happen to see the true vibe of this piece midway here is to wipe off the liquid, because that's another layer that's affecting the existence of the color. So we've got like a yellow, we've got browns, we got some deep purples over there. And mind you, this is like a brushed finish. I Scotch-Brighted this part before you guys came. If you were to polish under this, it would create a different look as well. So I'm gonna crank this and get some of the high voltage colors, and then I'm gonna show you some of the techniques that I use. Well, the dials are dipped. That's like the technique. I dip them and I submerge them, and I get different colors with a couple different processes there. But with this, you can kind of paint the colors on. So you're gonna start to see an orange, and there's like a pink that's about to show up in the center. Pink's pretty cool. I'm excited about the pink. There we go. And the longer you spend, the more oxide grows, because you're essentially growing this oxide layer. So there's like a crazy pink coming out of that. And the thing about anodizing...
So you're a dad? What's going on here?
Yeah, dadadizing? Wait, I missed that. I was too busy staring at this thing. I bet you punked me pretty good, though. I don't know.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
All right, cool. Dad jokes. Let's see here.
I resemble that remark.
This is really watch.
So we're getting a little hot. I kind of roasted that piece there, but this is the green, and kind of in between a couple of these colors here, I'm at about 120 volts for this workpiece. That's the color your dial, Adam. It's like this green blue, kind of around this spectrum that you're seeing here.
So there's
something I
really
wanted to point out. You've got to, Adam, at some point you have to show your watch, because I always get a kick when that thing comes around. It's just stunning. But my question, actually, if I may, is, so how much are you selling this tube of titanium for?
$60. I don't know.
Alrighty.
This tube of titanium.
I'm kidding.
If you're
But
really
I can't
clever, you
afford a
could
watch
smoke
right
pot
now.
out of it. But it's, yeah,
Oh.
I understand.
Oh, okay. That's something else then we need to discuss.
Yeah, actually would love to make like a really cool pot smoking device. This brush is kind of cool. I don't do this a lot for my watch work, but I've been getting into it for the pens to apply like these weird textures here. And what I have is I'm on a really high voltage setting, and I'm creating the contrast really fast. So I'm like whipping across. There's some smoke coming off the workpiece, and then I'll be like, boom, stamp down, create that crazy contrast, almost like burning the piece, which is why it looks like a flamed finish. Because you can see me like literally cut through that anodizing. There's like smoke coming off it. I'm like breathing it in. Oh, it's fucking nasty. Oh my God. For the sake of science. I love you guys. Oh shit. Okay, so remember when I talked about welding? If you touch the metal to it, it'll actually weld. So like the electrolyte is critical. So you saw that spark there, or maybe you didn't, and you just heard me curse real loud because I have no class. Yeah, you don't want to touch the pieces together because you'll ruin them. If you touch a dial,
you
while
really
you're
do have
making
to
it,
suffer to create.
you're finished. Oh, totally. And you get shocked too. But thankfully, it's only like an amp. So it's like,
I'm
suck
glad
it
we
up.
got to see that though. I was
disgusting,
hoping that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, people love to see it. It's like the falling knife. That you got to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So anyways, I just like roasted the crap out of this thing. You're seeing a crazy palette. And the key here is to like create contrast, right? So in my work, I'm always trying to create contrast and layers. With my classic prismatic watch, you'll kind of see some of these blue colors fade out to a darker hue. And it's a process that I came up with to create like this almost like fume dial. And I just saw a question come out, but like, yeah, you could totally do a titanium case back with a crazy motif on the back, something like really abstract. Cause like, like, hey, the titanium is kind of just like, it's, I don't know, it's a canvas. If we're using titanium to create your watch case, we might as well do something interesting with it. So one of the reasons I was showing that titanium process, and forgives me as I walk around my shop doing like 4 things at once right now, is because we're gonna be auctioning / selling, TBD, a limited edition titanium Schon design pen that is gonna be anodized in that kind of organic, wild process. I almost finished it this morning, but I didn't. So I'm not gonna spoil the surprises. But I have 1 titanium piece left. I sold out of titanium pens a number of months ago. They've been really popular. And I have 1 titanium pen that I'm working on right now. It's actually in the mill, and I actually just like broke a cutter right before we started talking. But I'm gonna be engraving our beautiful RedBar logo onto the final Schon design ballpoint titanium pen. And I'm going to be anodizing the logo inside of the logo, a color. It's going to be juicy. It's going to be tasty. It's going to be fantastic.
Delicious.
And it's going to be for a charity. It's going to be for a charity. So it's pretty sweet. I wanted to finish it, but broke a cutter.
Wow.
I had some balagan, I had some mishigas occur, and now I'm all famished. Okay, so
and Ghost. Mished
so,
and
yeah,
Ghost.
so
That's a terrible combination.
So I'm gonna finish that pen, and I'm gonna send pictures to Kathleen and Adam, and it's gonna be to raise money for a local charity here called Broad Street Ministry that provides an incredible variety of services for homeless and youth homeless in the city of Philadelphia. It means a lot to me. My wife's working with this company right now, not directly, indirectly through her current job. And we talked about it. So we're going to sell some baller ass art, and we're going to do some good while doing it. And we'll talk about another opportunity to also get your hands on a pen with the RedBar logo later. But I'm gonna like transition a little bit into like the second side of my work, which is like this side of the workshop, and talk a little bit about pens. And I'm going to show you some of the parts I'm manufacturing right now. We can talk a little bit about CNC stuff. I know it's 140, 142, so we don't have a ton of time. So I'm going to kind of do like a blast. I'm going to blast you with some stuff. All right, here we go. So before I started manufacturing watches, I started designing and manufacturing pens when I was in college. And I loved the idea of making something and like putting it in my pocket and using it every day. So I made these pens. This is a ballpoint pen here. And I threw it in my pocket, and some of my classmates were like, hey, let me get one of them pens. Can you make me that? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And so I'd spend like 7 hours machining one, and I'd be like, that's $100. And I was like, man, there's probably a better way for me to do this. So I started thinking about doing a manufacturing run. And I did like a batch of these in 2011. It was my first batch with a local machine shop. And I started producing pens and like accidentally started a pen company. And through the sales of these pens, I actually funded all of my watch manufacturing, which is how I was able to buy those pieces of equipment and take the risks that I did in manufacturing the parts. But I started making ballpoint pens. And over the years, between 2011 and 2015, I was experimenting with like multicolor aluminum anodizing, black pens, stainless pens, PVD DLC pens, brass pens, copper pens. This is the pen I signed my wedding contract with. It's kind of funky. But yeah, so I started making these pens, and I also made some fountain pens, which I'll show you in a minute. And it was like kind of the same reason I wanted to make watches. Like I was really into bikes at the time, and there was this whole like field of bicycle frame builders. So you go to your custom local builder and they build you a steel or aluminum or a titanium bike that fits your geometry, and they like craft the frame, and then you pick out all the parts, you put it together. And I was like, that's a pretty sweet lifestyle, making cool bikes, shredding them around. So I started making frames. And then I was like, this like idea of being the person that creates something for their community at a custom or a bespoke kind of level was sweet to me. So I was like, I'll make aluminum pens and I'll engrave them, and I'll carry those with me, and people want to, get something that's made by their friend. Same thing with the watches. I want to make a watch to put on my wrist so I can enjoy the manufacturing and the craft. So I got really into pen manufacturing. And then like I quit my job because I was like, I want to make watches and pens like forever, all the time, always. And that's all I want to do all the time. And I don't want a boss. So I just like quit my job and I started manufacturing pens full time. And then late about, maybe it was like 2 years ago, I bought my first Swiss lathe, which we're going to go over to in a minute. And I brought all my manufacturing in-house. So these 3 machines over there, which are about, 28 feet long a piece, manufacture pens from 12-foot bars of stock. So I started transitioning towards being a designer and an engineer for clients, and became like a manufacturing machinist, doubling down on some of the things I had learned on these starter machines in my apartment, and bought, this massive bar-fed Swiss-style CNC lathe to produce my pens in my shop. And I learned how to program these machines, learned how to set them up, started teaching myself about tooling. And I'm going to stop this machine in a second so we can see what's going on inside. But yeah, I bought a Citizen watch company L16, which is a Swiss-style automatic lathe that was, these types of machines are common, ubiquitous in the watch industry. So I bought one of these machines for making my pens, and I'm learning on it now. And hopefully in the future, I'll start applying some of this knowledge, some of these processes, and what I've learned here to make more complicated, more advanced watches. Because this machine can produce any turned part and even some milled parts in watches. Right now, I'm making a pen section. I finished these yesterday. These are like some ridged fountain pen sections. I'll show you what they look like in a pen. And then we'll kind of dive into the machine. I'll show you what I got going on there. But this is one of those parts. This is a copper fountain pen grip on a purple anodized aluminum fountain pen, made in Philly, in this shop. But yeah, I design these parts. I come up with that idea on paper. I sketch it out. I make a CAD model, and then I'll make the 2D document. I'll make like a set of coordinates to kind of work off of. And then I'll go in here and I'll program by hand how the parts are run. And each of these little pieces of code are called G codes, and they produce geometry. And this is an automatic lathe, so it runs from really long bars and can produce like, let's say 30 or 50 of these parts until I have to stop it and check on it. And it's like super oily, so I never wear nice clothing anymore because I'm just like a big oily mess. But yeah, as you can see here, let's see if I can put my phone in here without getting it covered in oil. The work is there where my finger is pointing. That's where the copper is coming out for these parts. These are your turning tools. These are for all the outside geometry, like your outside thread, your grooves. These are your milling tools. So like if you were making, let's say, pinions or a pen with a clip that has a milled flat, drilled holes, tapped holes, you would put your milling tools in here. And then these are the inside tools, a drill, a boring bar, and a threading tool. And then that's the part 50% done. So when it's done over there, it passes it over here, and then it goes over there and uses these tools on this side, tool number 33, which is marked in a very professional grade Sharpie. Oh, got oil on my phone. I deserve that. And then the parts are spit out here into this work collector that I built, which is kind of like, you know, you got to be creative. You got to like make a solutions, because like a lot of this stuff, it's not out of the box, but these are the finished parts for my fountain pen grips in copper. These are going to be out in like a couple weeks. Sick. But yeah, I've been transitioning the past bunch of months to being more of a manufacturer of in-house product and experiencing a lot of learning in that space. And I'm hoping, let's get this bad boy running. Yeah, work, buddy, work. All right, cool. But yeah, I'm hoping that a lot of this knowledge is going to cross back over into my watch stuff in due time. And once I have enough product on the shelf in the pen space, I can start applying some of these things to make different watch-related products. And I have 2 more of these machines over here, which right now are going to be used to create some of my new fountain pen product. So a lot of people ask me, you know, when they see me at a pen show, whoa, you make pens, like what does that really even mean? And for me, this is like my process. And I want to acknowledge that for each brand and each creator, there's no right or wrong process. This is not the best or the only way to make pens. This is not the best or the only way to make watches. And I think it's important as like a maker to acknowledge that my peers who are micro brand owners, who are manufacturers, who are pen companies, who are watch companies, everyone's got their own process, and there's no right or wrong way to do to create product. But this is like my way that I do it, and it's special because, well, you decide if it's special. It's not better because it's made in America, or it's not better because I make it. It's just like, this is the way that I make it, and I hope you enjoy it. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I think with American brands in particular, it can be a lot about made in America, or this is an American-made pen. And though it is true and interesting, it does not make it better than a pen made by another artist in another space. But this is the way that I do things, and I find joy in manufacturing the stuff myself. But could I have sourced the dot cardinal design with, you know, a watch producer, and maybe got John Ferrer involved to help me source the parts and get the case manufactured? Sure. And it would be a great watch still, and it would be much more affordable, but that's not what brings me joy in the watch process. It's the actual making of it. So I've chosen this path. And if this type of thing resonates with you, I'd be happy to work with you to make you something, be it a pen or be it a watch, but also acknowledge that it's not the only way to do things. And there are more economical, less craft-oriented ways to do things. But yeah, this is my studio. And I think the last thing I want to mention is that Kathleen and I were talking a little bit more about like this charity pen and what we could do to raise a couple bucks. So we decided to do that titanium pen, which is going to be absolutely baller. But we're also going to do 10 pieces of a RedBar edition ballpoint pen in silver with a clip. And we're going to be doing, 5 pieces ballpoint RedBar pen and 5 pieces a fountain pen with the RedBar logo. So 10 pieces together, 5 fountain, 5 ballpoint, also to raise charity for a Broad Street ministry. 100% of the proceeds of these pen sales are going to go to that charity. So these 11 pens are going to do some good, and we'll have more details as these gel and catalyze. They're going to be pretty sweet. I'm actually thinking about anodizing this run of 10, a color that I've never done before, which is like a steely kind of like gray aluminum, which I'm like really pumped about. So stay tuned for that. We'll have 10 pieces. We'll do some good. These pens, the aluminum ones, are going to be around like 120 bucks, and 100% of the proceeds are going to go to Broad Street Ministry. And the titanium pen, we're going to try and raise as much money as we can with this art piece to, again, give them some great funds in this time, because they're a rad organization, and y'all are a rad group of people who like to help rad organizations. So yeah, I guess I'll reopen it up to questions. Not that it hasn't been the whole time, but yeah, thanks for coming into my studio. This is MTV Cribs. Peace out. Wait.
Thank you for having us.
Then we fade to black. No. I stole that.
I half expected you to come out of Adam's beard when you did that.
Seriously, like that's like the best move ever. like totally co-opted that. Just like, oh,
Yeah, that was a solid thing. But this is amazing, and what a wonderful a project too. I have to say thank you for that. You know, it's a big part of what we do with RedBar, and you know, I just especially nowadays we got to keep giving back. But thank you just for the
totally.
insight in how you work. Like if you weren't married, I'd marry you because you're just fun. You know, you're a lot more fun than my wife is.
Hello. Shots fired.
She's not listening, so I'm safe up here. There's a reason I'm outside.
So I'm gonna have Adam just like if you guys, I'm gonna spotlight his video really quick, not Adam, but Atom, because he's got the.
You know, my video is not a good video.
So if you look behind the beard and the face, there is a photo
I love that dial.
of the crystallized titanium piece that Atom owns. It's on my arm, I think. I think that's my wrist.
That is your arm, Kathleen.
And it's just such a beautiful color. It's like that shade of blue. It's like kind of greeny, bluey color. It's just so stunning. And I really love this piece. And the crystalline titanium is just, to me, it's like when I affectionately refer to you, Ian, as a mad scientist, it's like basically because of this. Like you like figured out how to make this bend titanium to your will, kind of, and it's kind of like that's fascinating to me. And I also I think you can see a little bit more in this photo that finish that, you know, appears like a hammered finish, but it's totally smooth. So every time this watch shows up at RedBar, you know, when we were allowed to be places, people would pick it up expecting it to feel textured, and would always, like, their eyes would go wide when they would realize that it was kind of a smooth case finish. So I have a question about that, because I saw that you have the you know, the other piece, the orangey kind of one, and is that one still available? Somebody asked about the price on that one in the Q&A. And
yeah, that was a stunner.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous, and I kind of want
Thank
it.
you.
But also, are you planning on making more crystalline titanium? Because I think it's not just a cool technical achievement, it's really pretty. So I'm just curious if you're going to make any more of those, or if you're going to work with that material.
Great question. I've just been working out a lot of the kinks in the production. It's very difficult to make that watch case, because when you create these crystals, the whole thing wants to move, because you're really changing its like structure to make those grains. But yeah, I'll be making a bunch more of those pieces. I actually just finished 4 watches that were crystallized titanium in the past like 3 months. It's been a bit of a mad rush for basically that blue watch. I've made like 5 times now. It's a great watch. But yeah, I haven't had anything for sale because I've been busy fulfilling those orders. And most of them are actually in Japan. One of them is in the US. And there's a really funny story that I'll tell you over drinks about the other one of those that's in the US. It's kind of amazing. Can't wait to tell about it in person, but it's a customer, so I want to be polite about it.
Okay.
And not
Can we
talk
see
about
the
it.
orange dial again?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually picking it up. Good call.
That's about it in the
This piece, I'm like sitting on my windowsill to get better light here. Oh yeah, here we go. It is in theory for sale. It's in theory for sale. I just I'm like really picky about what I let out the door. And this dial is like a little more matte, and it's one of the first ones that I ever created. It does have the same texture, but I was like, I don't know. And I just kind of held on to it. And I've worn this watch a bit. The hands on it are top notch. This is like literally when I made these, let's see here. Let's get it to focus. This was the same batch of hands that I made Adam's hands with. And since then I've developed a new process, and they're like uber flat. The case isn't great. You know, it's like the same, it's actually the same batch that I made Adam's in. These two I debuted, I think, at the Wind-Up show in New York City. But yeah, I guess it's for sale. I don't know. I'm like one of those guys who I'm just like, I'm tormented by my own idea of perfection. And this watch, you know, full disclosure, this watch is water resistant, you know, 1 atmosphere. Normally my watches are water resistant to like a spec of 10 atmospheres, but because of the crystallizing on this particular case, it only tested to 1, and it's because like the seat is a little bit down. So it's like a dress watch, you can't dive in it, and it's perfectly fine. But it's just one of those things where I'm like, you know, I have to disclose that type of stuff. I'm not going to be shiesty and say that it has a 10 ATM rating like my other watches. Yeah, it's because it moved a little bit during the heat treat, but it's a cool freaking watch.
Ian, can I share a quick anecdote about the watch that you made for me in the photo
Sure.
behind me here? I was at the Natural History Museum here in New York City a while back, and they have famously they have a big actual meteor sitting in their museum, and I was in that room, and there's a couple of pieces of meteorite around the room, and I was talking with the guy who worked there, and I showed him the back of the watch like you're showing us right now, and he was like, "Oh wow, is that meteorite?" And I said no, and I told him what it was, and he brought me over to a certain piece on the wall, and he's like, there was a cutaway of a piece of meteorite, and he's like, "Oh, it reminds me of this because inside of the meteorite, of like the iron, the metal that makes up the meteorite, it is literally a very similar appearance to that because it's the metal has been compressed so much over time." So it's really
interesting.
It was really interesting to see and compare that. So if people are interested what it kind of actually looks like in person, it's almost like meteorite.
Totally. I think actually there's an analog there, because as part of the process that I use to create this material, there's a lot of compression and a temperature. It's like a lot of time, compression, and temperature going on. This is a dot prismatic, or a dot cardinal. Sorry, let me wipe this off real quick. Scritch, 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 scritch. There we go. But yeah, this is the watch that I made for the Hodinkee review in steel with white numerals. And I love this piece. I thought about keeping it for myself, but I should probably sell it. This one is for sale. I actively haven't been trying to sell it just because I've been like so focused on getting work out the door that I promised people right now. But if someone is interested in having a watch soon, this piece is around, and it is a celebration of steel and all of its textures. That's kind of like one of the things, I'll come up with a theme for like one of my watches, and the prismatic was all about titanium and the properties of titanium, and the cardinal is all about steel and texture. And as Adam will attest, it is one of the most difficult watches to photograph or look at through a video. But when you see it in person, a lot of these textures, you know, the circular grains versus like the micro bead blast on the outside versus the flat polish on the hands, create so many different grays and whites and steely tones. And that was kind of like, this piece to me was like a celebration of those tones.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And yeah, to your point, I mean, obviously there's a lot of reflection happening with the light, but that's one of the things that, you know, that makes those kinds of pieces with multiple textures really beautiful in person, because it's like you move your wrist and the watch looks completely different on
Yeah.
that you have your wrist. That's great.
I just put up a photo of that one behind me here. Might even be
cool.
that actual watch, Ian. I'm not sure.
It is actually. That is the watch.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There it is in a photograph. Yeah.
Yeah. Does a better job that way than in a bag on my desk. But
yeah.
But yeah, thanks. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's slightly more visible in this photo. Just a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Well, does anybody on the panel have any other questions or comments or anything like that?
No, I'm good. I just really want a pen. I want a watch. I want to get married to you. This was really enlightening. What a pleasure. Thank you. This is the most fun I've had all day.
Yeah, this was really great. Thank you for bringing us into your workshop and showing us the magic wonders of the anodizing process and kind of all of the watches and pens. We're really excited about that, and I'm really excited about the fundraising for charity. That's a big part of what we try to do at RedBar. So thank you so much for that. And for those of you who are attending and are interested in those pens, the details will be forthcoming shortly. So everybody again, and we will have this recording up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thanks.
Again
Thanks,
for
Ian.
Thank you. Take care. Thanks,
hosting,
Ian.
and again, thank you for sharing this with us. Ian.
My pleasure.
All right, guys.
Cheers,
Take
y'all.
care.
Cheers out.
Cheers, y'all.